I'm Paul, and I was born April 30th, 1971.
In what years did you live your childhood?
I am a child of the 1970s and early 80s. I grew up in Cudahy, Wisconsin.
How many people were in your family? Who were they?
I was the youngest of 4 children. I have 2 older sisters, Amy and Ann, and an older brother, Eric. And I lived with my mom and dad on Plankington Avenue in Cudahy.
What was a typical day like when you were younger?
When I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have any cell phones or computers or anything, so we spent a lot of time playing in the neighborhood with the kids down the street, going to the park, riding their bikes. When we weren't in school, we were going over by other people's houses and playing a lot of board games.
Describe a typical school day. What were your teachers like?
I went to Lincoln Elementary in Cudahy, and I had a lot of different teachers. Most of them I liked. Some of them I didn't, but I enjoyed school. I was good at it, and I was a good kid.
Did you join extracurricular activities when you were in school?
When I was in school, I was mostly involved in Boy Scouts, and I worked from the time I was 13. And when I was in high school, I went on the swim team, and I was in the theater when I was a senior.
What kind of work did your father do?
My dad worked full-time for Wisconsin Electric as a meter serviceman.
What did your mom do?
My mother worked second shift as a medical technologist at Trinity Memorial Hospital. So my mom saw the kids off to school, she prepared supper when my dad came home, and then she left to go to work.
What kind of technology did you use when you were in school?
When I was in school, we used clay tablets and chisels. When I was in school, we had paper, pen, and pencil, except when I got to go to my discovery class and we got to use a state-of-the-art Radio Shack TRS-80 computer.
So, what was dinner time like? Did you eat as a family?
One of the few rituals we had was eating at or right around 5 o'clock, no matter what day of the week it was. So my mother always prepared a meal, and the kids were all expected to be there on time, ready to eat, until you were excused.
What did you talk about at dinner?
Dinner, we usually talked about what we did during the day or what we were going to do or who needed to go where when. So sort of just taking care of business. I don't remember talking about anything particularly serious or anything like that. It was usually a fun time.
And who usually did the cooking?
My mother did all the cooking except for the grilling, which was done by my father.
What do you remember about world events? Were there any serious global conflicts occurring? What were they?
When I was growing up, there's a lot of things going on. I remember the Iranian hostage crisis was probably the first world event that I remember, and I especially remember the attempt to rescue the hostages. I also remember the assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan when I was in grade school, and the principal came over the PA system and told us.
What do you remember about national events? Who were the presidents during your time growing up?
One of my earliest memories growing up was of the American Bicentennial, 1976, so I would have been 5 years old. So Jimmy Carter was the president at the time, followed by Reagan, and I really didn't have too much of a grasp on what was going on nationally.
So, what did you fear the most
And read the paper,
as a child?
so My biggest fear as a child by far was nuclear war. I didn't understand what was going on. When Reagan became president, the Cold War heated up in the early 80s, and the threat of nuclear annihilation was very real. I remember reading a Time magazine when I was in junior high and showing that 1% of all the world's nuclear arms could destroy the entire planet. That freaked me out. Well, I grew up as a Packer fan, and I watched the games with my dad. So he taught me to be a good Packer fan and a good Brewer fan, and Brewers were good at the time, so I listened to the games on the radio and played solitaire. And didn't get a chance to go to too many of the games, but I did go to a few games when I was a kid. And the Bucks were good too. So outside of the Packers not being very good, it was a pretty good time to grow up in Milwaukee, sports-wise.
What kind of music did you listen to?
Growing up, I listened to a lot of Top 40 radio, and my brothers and sisters listened to album-oriented rock, so I grew up on classic rock and pop radio, and I bought 45
Who
singles.
was your favorite
to
musical
listen to.
artist when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, I really didn't have a favorite artist. I just had favorite songs that I liked to listen to the radio for, but as I got older and I recognized I liked certain songs by certain bands. I love the Police and U2, along with classic rock artists like Pink.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, we don't do.
I am a child, I last a while. You can't conceive of the pleasure in my smile. You hold my hand.
How did you listen to music growing up?
I listened to music the old-fashioned way, on the hi-fi. So I listened to the stereo. My brothers and sisters had a few albums, but they'd never let me touch them, so that's when I bought my own 45s. So my first thing that I did, however, was get some cheap tapes, blank ones from Kmart, and I could tape songs off the radio. And once I could do that, I could listen to it. It was magical. Well, when I was growing up, I loved the Saturday morning cartoons, so I'd have to say that.
Why was that your favorite TV show?
Well, I like Scooby-Doo because it had monsters and scary things, but it was skeptical, and they always figured out what was going on at the end, and there never really was a monster. There was always a logical explanation for it, so.
What kind of TV shows were on when you were just around that you were kind of forced into watching?
Well, since we only had one console TV in the house, and then a little while later, when I was older, we got a black and white one. There really wasn't much choice, so I had to watch whatever was on. So Laverne and Shirley and The Love Boat and Fantasy Island, and then after school would be like The Brady Bunch and Get Smart and I Love Lucy and whatever other syndicated TV shows that were available.
What movies do you remember seeing growing up?
Well, outside of cartoons, first real movie I remember seeing was Star Wars, and I was so totally blown away. I was 6 or 7 at the time it came out, so Star Wars would be my biggest memory for a movie growing up by far.
What clothing styles were popular when you were younger?
Well, when I was younger, there was a lot of earth tones and bell bottoms and bad patterns, but I had a lot of clothes from my cousins, so I had a lot of hand-me-downs. Grew to enjoy the really too much into fashion.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I just had a classic bowl cut, and then when I got a little older, like 6th or 7th grade, I started parting my hair.
What kind of gadgets and technology did you have as a kid? It can be for work or for fun.
Well, one of the first things I remember
As
relatives
a
of
kid
ours,
was
my
dad
dad's
installing
family, a microwave oven in the early 80s for a Christmas present, and that was an amazing piece of technology when I was growing up. And then eventually we got the VCR and cable TV, and
What kind of toys did you play with?
I played with a lot of toys. We had tons of board games. We had games outside, catch, football, baseball. We had a basketball hoop. So a lot of things, physical things, or things where you use your mind.
Do you think the world was a better place when you were a kid?
Well, the world was a better place for me when I was a kid, when you don't have so many responsibilities and know what's going on. But I would have to say that today is probably the best time to be alive as far as for medicine and technology and civil rights and everything else. So as a kid, it was fantastic, but I wouldn't say that it was